So I tend to have this really bad habit where I'll go on eBay and I will buy the first thing that catches my eye. And this right here was some kind of a Dell replacement part for something. And as far as I could tell from the product photos, it at least had a processor, it had a RAM slot, and it had a display output. So I figured for $8, could I go wrong buying some completely unidentified, very strange computer-looking thing? And we're going to see just how much of a home server we can build out of whatever this thing is. But first, what in the world is this thing? I'm going to try to figure out just as much as I can just by looking at it. There are two dominant chips. One of them is a larger AMD die, and then the other one is a smaller AMD die. We also have some kind of a RAM slot, which I'm going to have to figure out what kind of RAM that actually uses. Our DDR4 right here. Oh no, it's also, okay. I thought it was going to be DDR4. And our DDR3, looks like that one is going to be the right one. So whatever we're working with here is probably anywhere from maybe 2010 to 2015 hardware. It's taking a DDR3 SODIMM module right there. Maybe this means it's not going to be very fast, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to see just how much it can do. I also see a full-size SATA slot mounted in a way that doesn't allow you to put a hard drive on, which is actually really weird. I don't understand why they would do that. Not much else. On the back, there's DisplayPort, DVI, two USB 2.0 ports, a Ethernet port, and a DC power jack of what type, I'm not entirely sure right now. Now, as far as cooling is concerned, I honestly have no idea what the TDP of these chips on the board are, but they're conveniently laid out right next to each other. So I was thinking I could start with just using a standard NVMe heatsink, like you would put on a regular SSD. And of course, we're not going to have the mounting pressure that this board probably calls for, given the fact that it has a bunch of those little threads right there for the presumably original CPU cooler to go onto. But this should at least give us a very small amount of thermal headroom. Okay, so I don't really know what to expect, but I'm going to try to start here with 5 volts, and I don't know if this connector is the right size. Oh, it seems like it wants to plug in. Oh, no, that might be a little bit too big. And after attaching power, 12 volts right now, it does look like we have a BIOS screen. Wow. Okay. I have my finger on the CPU right now. And it is heating up. Yeah, that's starting to heat up pretty good. Ooh, okay. I think I need to set up a better cooling solution for now. Okay, so you can see I reconfigured things a little bit. I've got a fan right now, a solder fume fan, which I figured should hopefully be high enough airflow to at least keep the chips somewhat cool. And I put some taller heat sinks on. So if I can help it, I'm going to try to plug it in like this without disrupting everything. So as long as our CPU doesn't burn up, we should hopefully get an image again. And I went ahead and plugged in a Ventoy USB with some Linux ISOs on it. So hopefully if this comes on. And you can see turning on the system here, we're just getting this little BIOS screen. It looks like the only boot option that we have is this Realtek PXE LAN. I assume that's like a PXE boot sort of network image boot, which I don't have anything set for that right now. And if I tab over, I can get into the setup. And there's a password prompt. This is a problem because I didn't know that there was going to be a password on the system. Well, according to this, it seems like there might be a factory password fire port with a capital F for getting into the BIOS right there, so we can try it. Fire port. Hey, look at that. Okay. I was really worried about that because I had no clue what I actually had to set. So you can see right here, this is a very generic PC BIOS. We have our 4096 4 gigabytes of RAM going right there. And it looks like we have that AMD GT48E. So just going through here real quick, I'm kind of curious. It does look like there's some option for that SATA port. It can be IDE or AHCI right there. So yeah, as you can see, this is a very generic PC BIOS. So I guess what I'm going to do is go ahead and grab a Ventoy USB and try to load up some kind of Linux ISO on this thing, see if we can use it and see how it can perform. So I'll go ahead and restart and grab one of those. And you can see just like that, we did get into our Ventoy USB right there. I can scroll through and see all of my different operating system images. And what I usually use to test a system, especially when I'm benchmarking a NAS or whatever, is Fedora Desktop. This is the KDE variant. So we'll go ahead and boot it up and see how long it takes, see if we can actually get into a desktop. Okay, so we finally have a desktop, but it took several minutes to get there. And as you can see, I just clicked on the menu a little while ago. It's not even really responsive typing into the terminal, like it's not moving very fast. After about 45 seconds, I can finally see the web browser. I'm gonna try to install the dependency that I need to actually run Performance Mark, but it's gonna take a while. I can just tell it's gonna take a while. Okay, I'm just about ready to run the benchmark, and I can finally see that CPU temperature right there of about 80 degrees Celsius sitting and doing nothing right now. So with any luck, we should be able to run the performance test and hope it doesn't get too warm. I feel like this might be a problem, but I'm going to go ahead and run it, maxing out at that 1.4 gigahertz rated frequency of the CPU up to 86 degrees. These are obviously some kind of a mobile chip that are not designed to be ran full bore like this, so I guess I can't expect a whole lot. With a CPU mark of 258 and a single thread score of 357. So it doesn't even seem like having two cores is actually helping the CPU. But so far, this is looking like the absolute worst CPU mark I have ever tested on any piece of hardware I've ever put in front of a camera. So in the spirit of actually trying to utilize this board, because there's not much you can do when you're just booted off of a USB stick, is I wanted to figure out how I could potentially use this SATA port right here. And something that came to mind is this kind of a SATA extension cable, like for a laptop style hard drive. So what this cable should be able to do, in theory, is just plug into the SATA port right here. And if I push it in, now I can plug in a hard drive without actually trying to fit it in here. Obviously it wouldn't work with all the stuff that's on the board. And just to keep things cheap, this is a random Toshiba hard drive that I think I got out of a PS3. But I'm hoping that just like that, I might be able to go ahead and install a lightweight operating system, and we'll see if we can go ahead and use this as some kind of a NAS. And as for installing an OS, I can't think of anything better than my longtime favorite, which is, of course, Zima OS. That's going to go on that 160 gigabyte drive. And with Zima OS installed, this is going to be just like setting up any other Zima OS NAS. Of course, I've gone through this whole process several times on this channel. And I think that Zima OS tends to be a really good choice for this kind of lower powered hardware, where you want to be able to really easily deploy things like Docker containers and spin up file servers without a whole lot of work. So just like that, after having created a user account, I can go ahead and open up the App Store. We can get Jellyfin right there. Install, and we'll let it do its thing. And as you can see, I set up our server here with just one piece of media right now. This is a 4K Blu-ray rip of the Angry Birds movie that we're using to demo this, and I'm going to be using Jellyfin Desktop on Windows. The reason that I'm doing that, of course, is the fact that Jellyfin Desktop is going to be using direct streaming. So all the NAS is really doing is taking those encoded video frames off of the hard drive and sending them over the network to my client here, and the client is actually doing all of the really hard work of decoding this H.264 stream and rendering it on the screen. So you can indeed see here that we are direct playing this MKV file. So that's just one example of how you can realistically use even one of the worst computers that I have benchmarked for a genuine media server. And we'll go ahead and install another app just to demonstrate something a little bit different. This is QBitTorrent, which you can use as a very convenient lightweight torrent manager. So I'm going to be using this to try to grab a Linux ISO just as a very quick demonstration of how you can get another Docker service running on this system. I'll go ahead and log in right here, and you can see that we are provided with our user interface. So as a very quick example, I'll go ahead and grab a torrent for this copy of Ubuntu Desktop for Intel. Just download that file, and then we can take this torrent and we can drop it right into the web UI. This is going to pop up a window that's going to allow us to decide where we want to save the downloaded file. I'm just going to let it go. And in just a second, we should start getting peers and we'll start downloading this file. As you can see, this is working perfectly fine. We're already up to about 55 megabytes per second and still going up downloading this file. The web interface is surprisingly snappy, even on this very low-end CPU. So there's just another example of some other service that you can very easily get running on very limited hardware. So I have to admit that throughout all of my testing of this weird little board, I was actually really impressed with all of its capabilities. Of course, that CPU is nothing special. It can't do a whole lot. You saw how terrible the benchmarks were on this chip. But if you're willing to look past the raw performance numbers and you really just want to get the most out of something that you can honestly buy for a incredibly cheap price nowadays, considering how expensive other compute options are right now, I don't think this is all that bad of an idea. This cable was about $5, which is kind of funny to think. It was like 70% of the cost of the entire computer it's plugged into. But it just goes to show that you don't have to spend a lot of money if you want to get started in home lab and actually setting up your own server for your own personal use. Of course, you can expand the setup, like with the SATA port, and then you have a couple of USBs that you could theoretically add some storage into. But there is something I do have to come clean about, because throughout this whole video, I've kind of been stating that I don't really know what this thing is or where it comes from. Well, I did end up figuring out where it actually comes from. And if I put this thing to the side, I will bring over the answer right here. This is called the Dell DX0D Thin Client, and what it was designed to do was sit plugged into a monitor and connect to a more powerful server. That's literally all that these things are made to do. It's a thin client. It's not meant to compute things on its own. It's meant to allow you to use a bigger server. This was from the Wise brand, which Dell actually bought out a number of years ago, and they specialize in making these really slow, really low-end computers, and they have some really nice things about them. This one right here has a solid-state flash module mounted right there, which is that same exact SATA port that I was talking about earlier. You can see that right there. It's just like a tiny little SSD. I think this is only, 8 gigabytes, so it's nothing very special. You can use the exact same cable that I demonstrated earlier, and you can actually go ahead and add a hard drive to the setup. Of course, it's also really nice that you're getting a true passive heatsink when you buy the full thin client, and you're getting some other extras like on the front here, 2 more USB ports, and crucially a power button is all mounted on this I/O board in the front. So if you want to be able to use this thing practically, I would absolutely recommend buying the full thin client. These things are going to run you about $20 for a full setup, whether or not they come with that flash storage module, and then you just need a regular plus 19 volt DC power adapter to be able to run these things. Of course, you have the same DisplayPort, DVI, USB, Ethernet. So yeah, I think that's just about going to wrap it up for this video. This is really a pretty interesting little piece of hardware for $8, but obviously, if you can, you should probably get it in the full setup where you can actually use it somewhat effectively in one of these thin clients. They're still very cheap, pretty versatile, include a lot of I/O, and I think they could be a really good addition to a home lab if you have really low requirements. But at this price, it's hard to really get any amount of compute nowadays. Even if it's something as slow as one of these things, there's still something that you can do with it. So hopefully this was a little interesting. Let me know if you're interested in doing something like this down in the comment section below. And as always, have an awesome day.